wonderful Helen Woodcock. Thank you very much.
Cheers. Thank you very much, Sarah. So yes, I'm Helen Woodcock. I'm the Risk and Sustainability Director at Callison, and you might be wondering what Callison is. So to give some more context of who I am and who Callison is a leading financer of essential energy infrastructure supporting the UK's transition to low carbon future through smart meters, EP chargers, heat pumps, etc. So, we are very much in the energy space, the green tech space, and it's about creating that impactful change with mass rollout technology, really. But who am I? I have been in a decade of looking at compliance, ESG, and risk, and I have had the pleasure of working with Satala for a number of years now. But that just isn't who I am. I am very much, I'm very passionate about community engagement, working in education, working with schools and local organisations about how can we embed what we want to do and the change we want to see in everyday lives. So that's where I'm coming at from today's presentation. And yeah, hopefully I'll try to get across how we can create a real impact working with our communities and really get that kind of driving meaningful change and grassroots change. So before I go on any further, I just wanted to pose a question to you all really and ask, how many times have you heard the saying or heard people say, there's no point me doing something because I'm just one person, there's millions of people in the world. If you can put, I don't know, one or a two in the chat or something like that, if you've really heard that kind of saying, because I hear it all the time. And my response to all that is that if I speak to 50 people in the day and they all say that, if all of those 50 people have made a change, that's the ripple that's starting. And that's where we need to start off with here is that if you want to go far, we need to go together. We can't do this on our own. And one voice is great, but having multiple, it really creates that amplification of the difference and the change we're wanting to make. So I think from my point of view, I found organisations have very much always been, and I've very much been a data person, and I'll put myself in this point for a while, is we talk a lot about frameworks and reporting and data, but what actually difference are those things actually making is there's nothing actually coming off the back of it. And it's about actually utilising things that you've got and that data you've got, but to derive the actual change and how people want to feel. So it's involving people. So when you involve people in a process and you involve people in change, they'll feel responsible for it. If you dictate it to them, they will make it feel, it's being imposed on them and they're more likely to react. So change becomes kind of collective when it's not isolated. So, and by that I mean, as an organisation, Callison can do one thing, but if no one's adopting the technologies we're working with, then there's no point in us being around and doing what we're doing. It's about how do we take people on that journey. And I think it's really important about communities, driving that action and feeling part of it. And it's been able to see their personal impact. And I think that's the really important thing that I wanted to try and get across within this point is communities will drive change, but you've got to take them on that journey with you. Now, that being said, organisations can do that by bringing people together, but the collaboration needs to be intentional. And there's no point in you kind of working with, organisations that don't align with who you are and your values of your organisation, because if you do that, misalignment can have the opposite effect. And I think that is really important to kind of look at as well. So being in the community is really important, but being in the right community is more important. And those right partnerships can take you from having no impact to actually making a difference and actually changing the world. And I'm going to put it out there because you can. It turns into a ripple. That small stone going into the water can have a ripple effect and can really take kind of momentum if it is done right. So it's not just about going and finding the biggest name and thinking I'm going to partner with them to do something. It's about finding the right names and bringing them all together. And that's what we've been here doing at Callison, is really looking at our values and what difference do we want to see, and ensuring that we're kind of aligning with who we want to see at those kind of certain points as well. So it's about taking people on that journey and bringing the right people together to have the right conversations in the room. Instead of us having 10 conversations with 10 individuals, it's bringing those group of people in together and having a co-coordinated conversation. And that for me is really being has been really impactful with some of the stuff that we've done, and it's always going to be about kind of aligning the values of all organisations, because, as I say, if you don't do it, then it will have a completely negative effect, because it will kind of look like you're just doing something for the sake of doing it or ticking a box, and that is not what we're here to do. None of this is about commercial gain. This is about actually making a difference, and a lot of the relationships we have aren't here for commercial gain, and we're not here to, are we going to get, a sale here or something like, or a project here. It's putting that aside and putting the commercial elements aside and actually saying, what difference do we want to see and what changes do we want to see in people's lives? And it's not about always being sustainable. It's about how can we get people to act responsibly. And if we get people to act responsibly, sustainability will naturally happen and change will naturally happen. So that's kind of enough on kind of why we kind of done what we've been doing, and what have we been doing is probably a nice example to move on to. So some real life examples of some individual projects that I've been working on for the last few years, and some of these relationships I've had for a number of years, and I've actually now in some way brought them all together to co-create a mini community. And the focus that we've been looking at is Wigan. You might ask why that part of Manchester, or Greater Manchester in England. It's where one of our head offices is, and we decided to start small. There's no point in us trying to make change across the whole of the UK when, by kind of zoning your impacts and actually showing what you can do in a smaller area, that means that you can duplicate it and you can scale it. And that's where we're at the moment. It's showing what you can do with small change, and actually then how you can scale it up and actually bring other parties in and going along. So one of our long-standing relationships has always been with the Manchester and Wigan youth zones. And actually, I'll take a step back first before I kind of go into what those relationships are. Is our values and our organisation, we kind of looked at what difference or what issues are we seeing in the world, and what difference do we want to make to kind of resolve those kind of issues that we're seeing. The first one is, for our organisation, we haven't got enough green skills. There's not enough people out there wanting to install our assets and do that. There's not enough people going into the engineering space. And if there is, the diverse mix of those individuals, you're not seeing a lot of the women in the industry coming through, or people with potential disabilities, or from ethnic backgrounds. We're seeing it's very much been a very traditional white male area from our point of view. So that was kind of the first one, is actually how do we ensure that we've got a workforce to continue doing this for the next 10, 15, 20 years? And there's no point looking at the world as it is today and the guys who've got on the tools at the moment. We need to make sure that we're kind of future-proofing our workforce for the next 20 years. That's kind of one of our kind of key areas of focus. The other one is ensuring that the areas that we're working with, our products go into the community. So we need to make sure that the community does everything they need to live sustainably. And again, that's always about education. It's about what do they know? How do we ensure that people want to do the adoption and have everything that they need to know about that? So education is quite a key point of view for us. And the other one is actually not just looking at communities, but also businesses as well. So how can we ensure that businesses that are actually being utilised to do that education for us? Because not everyone will listen to Callison, because not everyone knows who Callison is, but there's going to be key stakeholders out there in the world that if they're doing it, then people will want to go on. It'll become a trend. It'll become hopefully not a fad, but it'll become something that people will want to do and continue to do. So there's been very much a focus on education, being green and being sustainable, looking after our environment with that's what our tech does, but also how do we ensure that the younger generation is educated? So, there was a stat I heard recently that I think it's from about the age of 8, a child will decide on basically what direction and career they want to go in. Now, if I'm honest, I never even thought at the age of 8, for me personally, what to do when I was growing up. I think I was going to be a vet, but then I didn't like the whole parts of that. But I think most kids now they've got so much conditioning from what they can see on social media and what their parents and grandparents have done, is that if you think about the green space and engineering, it's becoming less and less. There's less people probably going on to the trades and wanting to do those kind of things. and actually thinking more sustainably. This is a new thing, even though it's been around for years. Thinking about being green and doing things greener hasn't always been at the forefront of people's minds. So when we talked about going into eco schools and going into education, I had a bit of a pushback internally because they were like, yeah, but we're not an educator. We want to work with, organizations. But when I explained it to back to the organization, is actually the people we're talking to doesn't need to be, today's generation. We need to be actually talking to tomorrow's generation about how to live sustainably, because these are the ones that are going to be living with our products. These are the ones that are going to be coming into our workforce, and these are the ones that can actually make a difference. So it's about going back against your value chain. So yes, going into schools, you might not think that's going to have actually impact on our organisations, but what do kids do and do well? They will go home and talk to their parents, and they'll tell them what they've learned at school. They will also tell them about, we should be doing this and we should be doing that. I've had many people come to me and say, God, little Johnny's just come home from school today, and he's forcing us to do our recycling properly, and he's our bin monitor, and we'll sort the bins out. It forces things to happen at home, and then what happens? The parents will then go into work, and then they'll talk about it, as a lot of people do in here, and then there'll become a conversation that happens within the office, and then someone else will pick on something else, and it's that conversation that actually starts change, because then people will start thinking, well, what can I do? What difference can I make? That was kind of the key point from an eco schools. It wasn't just it is to educate them about there is green technology jobs out there, but also to, as long as they understand what world they want to see, they'll ensure that that's what the world they have when they get to the point where they can make that difference. Similar to what we've been doing with Manchester and Wigan youth zones, most of the people that attend the youth zones come from socio-economic deprived areas. And that means that, some of their parents might not, or the areas that they're in might not be focused on, different kinds of jobs and looking at different kinds of ways of living. So we go into there and actually show them what is possible in the world and what's actually open to them. And it's about empowering that through green projects and sustainable living, and actually showing them that they can break the norm and break that social norm that they've been brought up in, which might be very generational. And it's about how do we kind of give them that lifeline. And that's the work that we do there. We've been doing that for probably over 10 years now with the youth zones local to us. The next engagement we made was on the back of eco schools with the Keep Britain Tidy. Now, we were very much doing the work with eco schools was, supporting projects, ensuring that education's there. But then we kind of said, how can we make this ripple bigger? So we were just focusing with schools. And with Keep Britain Tidy, for us, that was, they wanted cleaner and greener spaces. We wanted a cleaner and greener environment. So ours is talking about air, theirs is talking about what you see on the ground. We both want the same thing, and it's how can we work together and kind of leverage both of our agendas to actually make a bigger impact and actually create a bigger change. So not only are we supporting, we both want cleaner and greener environments. That's what we're here to do. What we can do with Keep Britain Tidy, it's a door opener. For anyone that doesn't know, Keep Britain Tidy is, when we talk about litter on the streets and getting our streets cleaner. Picking up litter is the most simple thing you can do, but it actually starts a ripple of conversation and it creates a community pride. Once you've got that community pride there, people want to see what else they can do to make things better. And it's a door opener. It's a conversation starter for us to be able to actually get into different communities and, spread the message further on both parties. So that was a really good, I suppose, strategic partnership that we put in place, but it also allowed us to kind of bring that wider community together. And then I suppose, it looks a bit different with Wigan Athletic Football Club. You're kind of thinking, well, they're just a football team, brilliant. What they've done is they've created the first, we sponsored their first female football team, and you're kind of thinking, well, how does that align with us within energy, and that's football? Well, they were bringing, women in football is something which is, there isn't enough women in football. There isn't enough female engineers in what isn't already a male dominated area. We both want the same thing. We want to change the demographic of the people that are kind of working with. So we aligned on the sense of diversity, but what's actually come from the conversations with I think at Wigan Athletic is they're obviously wanting to they want to become green. They want to see if they can be one of the first football stadiums that can be, fully sustainable. So we're working with them on that, and that's actually opened up conversations where they don't just want to leave it at the sense of the stadium. They said, how can they then leverage what they can do with their fans and everything else? So again, that's the ripple effect. All these were set up as separate individual work streams that we had until this year. So what we did this year is we've actually brought them all together. And so we held an event this year where we actually brought, we involved Wigan Youth Zone, we involved the schools, we involved the youth zones and Keep Britain Tidy, and we did a community big litter pick. There was over 100 children took to the streets with the people from our organisation and Wigan Council. We brought the mayor along, and we, for a morning at the beginning of July, we cleaned the streets of Wigan. Now that had a massive ripple effect, and to the point that there's still press about it today, that it started conversations. And when I say conversations start where you expect them, they wouldn't usually. Picking up litter is where you wouldn't expect conversations to start, but it has. It has allowed us to open doors into people that we wouldn't have normally opened doors to talk about, as I say, not commercial agendas, but how can we come together as a community to create change? And what we were doing is we're role modeling to the whole of society without actually forcing ourselves on people to say, we all want a difference. And it's about changing the norm. So we had some police officers stop and say, how can we get involved? We had general parts of the community who, would continue to see it now, have, keep hashtagging us on LinkedIn about, we saw you doing this, now we're doing this. We've had groups internally within our organisation have now come together to create, sustainability groups of how they can do something for their own area. And it's basically then created this kind of ripple. We didn't just hold this within Manchester as well. We've got sites across the whole of the UK, and all of them did things on, a space of 2 weeks. And it started a conversation. And I think when we talk about local action scales to regional and national awareness, it does, because it really just kind of, as I say, it's that ripple effect. And then people, I've had people contacting us now saying, how can we do something? I want to, how can I be part of this? How can we be part of this change? So what I would kind of saying is it doesn't have to always start big. I would always start small, because the ripple will get bigger, and you might not see something in day one, you might not see something in day two, but the conversations will start and it will start gathering momentum. You may not think it's going anywhere, but it really does have an impact. And I think from our point of view, the doors that it's opened to are wanting people to learn more about tech and actually how they can make a difference and how they can make personal change. So I go back to my original statement is, I'm not having people as often coming to me saying there's no point in me doing it because I'm not going to make a difference. They're actually saying to me, I don't care if it's just me. If everyone did it, at least there'd be more difference made, and we'll make that kind of wider impact. So the slide I kind of wanted to kind of leave you on is to kind of ask yourself a couple of questions saying, is who aren't you working with yet, but could be? So if you think about your values of your organisation and what difference you're trying to make and how you can be, who can you? And reach out. It's about bringing people together. And it might be, one thing I've done with a lot of the stuff, we've introduced our partners to each other, and we have group community, that group community impact now, where we don't just have individual conversations, we have a wider conversation of what can we do to make a difference in this area. And one really important one is, especially with when we collect a lot of data, and also a point I wanted to come on to as well is the impact that we're having. We've obviously talked a lot about communities. It's about what can you do within your value chain. So the point I'm trying to make here is, are you helping change happen, or are you asking for it? So the language and communication I've had within our value chain is they've seen the impact we've been having with communities is, instead of me saying, demanding them to give me data, I've actually said, if you've not got it, how can I help you find it? Because if they can then do the value chain piece of, I can help them, then if they're struggling to get it from their supply chains, they will help them. If we're just in a demanding nature of just saying, I just want data, and if you can't give it me, I'm walking away. Shouldn't we be in a world of saying, if you are struggling, how can we work together to ensure that everyone is on the same path? And I think that's a really important, I suppose, final message I wanted to kind of leave on is, you can work with your community on the outside, but actually, how can we work within our own organisations? Because that is where ripple will happen. You know, I could go on to a whole thing on scope 3. I won't do it on this presentation here, but I probably can talk around it a lot more. But if we really want to see change, and we really want to see, you know, meaningful impact happening, we need to start, you know, helping rather than just asking. And my final statement is, if we want, when when we collaborate with our value chains and communities, we don't just teach responsibility, we grow it. So it's about how do it's that's organicness. And then through, care, courage, and challenge, because we do have to have that element of challenge in there, we can educate and inspire the next generation to think differently, act boldly, and create the change we want to see. So thank you.
Brilliant.
Any
Thank
questions?
you so much, Helen. Absolutely fantastic. Round of applause, everybody, for the brilliant Helen Ripple Woodcock, which is what I think we're now going to be calling you. That was great. Helen, there are some questions that I know that are coming through in the chat at the moment, because now we're going to welcome to our stage the fantastic Oliver. Oliver, if you've got slides or anything you want to share, now is a good moment to start clicking buttons. But just to finish off on Helen quickly, I love the way that you left that. Instead of just teaching responsibility, grow it, and actually having that humility and actually courage as an organization to see those interconnections, and not just doing the obvious thing or needing to be in the center of it. Actually saying, well, hang on a second, if we can give this little nudge or blow on that water, to take your ripple analogy further, then actually that can create massive change, and the ownership of that change in the best possible place. So brilliant. Thank you very much, Helen. Round of applause.
Thank you.